Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and today we are watching 5 most disturbing posts on the internet by Chilling Scares. I'm gonna go ahead and drop a like.
On December
Hop
21st,
right in.
2025, a Reddit user under the name DPH created a thread in the r/Louisville community with an alarming title: Possible Serial Killer in Louisville. The post itself made an ominous claim about a loose killer on a spree. So, my friend is in LMPD, and he said he overheard detectives from the homicide unit talk about multiple killings of unhoused people near the I-65 interstate. And they were saying how the killer supposedly drew a symbol near the bodies. Can we get more information about this, please? We need to know for sure. At first glance, it sounded like another baseless internet rumor.
Yeah.
Local residents accused him of fear-mongering and intentionally spreading panic among people. Contact the Coalition of the Homeless, any of the shelters, or the actual police to see if this is true. This is more spreading fear and false information than anything. Lay off the drugs. So tired of seeing fear-mongering posts. In fact, the Louisville Police Department was notified of the post as well, but after reviewing it, they found nothing that matched an open case or any record of a recent killing. DPH Trip Alt's account didn't offer much of an explanation either. There was almost no posting history beyond a string of entries about trips on Benadryl, the drug his username was referencing. So, to most people who came across the post, the obvious explanation was that this was just a guy rambling through a drug-induced haze. But there was one problem with that explanation. How does someone supposedly out of his mind on over-the-counter medication describe a killing that hadn't even happened yet, down to the interstate and the detail as specific as symbols marked near the victim's body?
Because he wasn't on
Because
Hades.
just 4 days later, on December 25th, 2025, a homeless man was attacked from behind and stabbed near the 2500 block of Crittenden Drive right along I-65,
Oh,
the same
fuck no,
interstate
he
mentioned
did
in
it.
the post. Luckily, he survived and was able to give police one important detail about his attacker. The man had fled the scene on an electric scooter. On its own, the attack wasn't enough to connect back to the strange Reddit post from days earlier, but that would change in less than 24 hours. In the early hours of December 26, 2025, Louisville Metro Police were called to a wooded area near the same stretch of Crittenden Drive. There, they found the body of a homeless man named Michael Howard. Michael's body showed signs of severe violence, with several parts of his body deliberately removed. Yet, even more unsettling were the symbols officers found marked into his skin, the exact detail described in the Reddit post just 4 days earlier. The police were beginning to notice a pattern. They began investigating Louisville's unhoused community. Several people described recent encounters with a young white man who regularly wandered the area wearing black tactical-style clothing. According to those who had crossed paths with him, he would harass unhoused people and was often seen riding an electric scooter. At first, those reports didn't point to any one individual, until one officer came forward with an interesting detail. Months earlier, while responding to an unrelated traffic collision, he had encountered a man who matched that unusual description almost exactly. Detectives revisited the body cam footage of this interaction, which led them to 21-year-old Michael Ristov. And as investigators dug into Michael Ristov's background, what they found only made him more suspicious. Both local and federal authorities had encountered him before. Investigators also uncovered reports that Michael was fascinated with serial killers, had previously harmed animals, and had even spoken about wanting to hunt homeless people. While the discoveries were unsettling, none of them proved Michael had actually committed either attack. Over the next few weeks, police began reviewing surveillance footage from nearby businesses, analyzed cell phone location data, and reconstructed his whereabouts during the days surrounding both attacks. What they found was enough to narrow the gap between suspicion and proof. According to police, Michael's phone had traveled through the area where victim Michael Howard was killed and where the surviving stabbing victim had been attacked. With the prime suspect, the detectives turned to the post that had started all of this. They subpoenaed Reddit for information connected to the anonymous account. The response brought them to an IP address linked to Michael Ristov's home in West Whitney Avenue, a few miles from where Howard's body was found. On March 7, 2026, investigators executed a search warrant at his residence. During the search, they recovered several electronic devices, including the scooter witnesses had reportedly described, and a backpack believed to have been used around the time of the attacks. Investigators also found a disturbing photograph in Michael's iCloud that appeared to show part of Michael Howard's remains. Around the same time, DNA testing on the backpack confirmed hints of Michael Howard's DNA. At that point, investigators had moved well beyond suspicion. They had surveillance footage, cell phone records, DNA evidence, digital evidence, and the anonymous Reddit account traced back to Michael Ristov's home. On May 13, 2026, a grand jury officially charged Michael with murder. The following day, on May 14th, members of the Louisville Metro Police and the department's SWAT team surrounded Michael Ristov's home to serve the arrest warrant. At around 1 p.m., officers announced their presence and attempted to take him into custody. But instead of surrendering, Michael barricaded himself inside. He was heavily armed and prepared, which meant he had been expecting this. A standoff with SWAT officers followed, lasting hours. Police deployed chemical agents and remotely operated equipment in an attempt to force him out. But instead of coming out, Michael made an unusual call to 911 to explain exactly how he believed the confrontation would end.
Everyone keeps asking me how I do my podcast alone. The answer, Riverside. I get high quality podcasts.
911 operator Miller, where is your emergency?
Yeah, so I'm being swatted at my residence. My name's Michael Ristov. I'm having a shootout with the SWAT team of your department. I am not surrendering. I am going to die.
What is the address to where you are?
In West Whitney Avenue.
West Whitney Avenue. What's your name?
Michael Ristov. H-R-I-S-T-O-D.
Not long after, the standoff came to an end. A SWAT officer fired a single shot, and that was it. With the immediate danger over, police searched the house one final time and recovered loads of tactical equipment, but nothing that answered perhaps the biggest question left in the case. Who had made the Reddit post, and why? Looking back, the person behind the post had known those details because he was the one planning them. The Reddit user was Michael Ristov. He likely did it because he wanted fame for the murders without revealing that he was the one behind them. By posing as an unsuspecting observer who had simply noticed a pattern, he could anonymously generate interest in his own crimes and watch as people began discussing them. And for someone who is already fascinated with serial killers and had shown interest in other violent criminals, that was likely the point. He wanted the same kind of notoriety and fear that the people he studied had gotten, and the Reddit post was his way of building that while staying hidden behind it. On December 14th,
Yeah, that one was a little crazy. Well, not a little, a lot, but yeah, he definitely posted that on Reddit because he was gonna do it, and he did do it. And I'm glad he's dead. Let's just keep it at that.
2013, a 48-year-old man from Port Washington, New York, uploaded a photograph to Facebook. The image showed the trunk of his car packed with fuel cans and propane tanks, and the caption read, "If you're gonna go out with a bang, might as well do it right with 25 gallons of gas and 40 pounds of propane." The man behind the post was Michael, or Mike, McNeil. Mike lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood with his wife Angela and their 2-year-old daughter. From the outside, there was little to suggest anything unusual about his life. He was just another husband and father living on a residential street in Port Washington, which made the photograph all the more unsettling. What would a suburban father need with 25 gallons of gasoline and 40 pounds of propane? A few people wondered the same thing, asking Mike where he was planning to escape to or use the gas for. "You are on Long Island. Where exactly are you planning to escape to? That's some expensive gas for your race car. Or is it an imposter?" But Mike brushed off the concern, replying, "Stocking up to avoid gas lines in case of hurricane, and we grill all winter long." His explanation seems reasonable enough, and no one thought much more of it. But just 8 months later, that comment about stocking up on gasoline would become one of the most unsettling details of his story. On the evening of August 5th, 2014, at around 8:15 p.m., officers from the nearby police department were called to Mike's home following reports of a domestic dispute. When they arrived, Mike's wife and their 2-year-old daughter were still inside. But as officers began escorting them out, they noticed something strange. The air around the house smelled strongly of gasoline. At first, they couldn't tell where it was coming from. But sensing the danger, they quickly moved the mother and child further away from the property. They had barely made it down the driveway when the detached garage exploded. The blast was so violent and powerful that witnesses compared it to a bomb. A huge fireball rose over the neighborhood as thick black smoke filled the sky, while the force of the explosion rattled homes blocks away. Flames quickly spread across the property, damaging neighboring homes and melting the siding on nearby houses. More than 100 firefighters from 17 departments responded as police evacuated the surrounding residents. Once the fire was finally extinguished, investigators began searching through what remained of the garage. Inside the rubble, they discovered the body of 48-year-old Michael McNeil. At first, it might have seemed like Michael had simply been caught in an unexpected explosion by accident, but fire officials determined that wasn't the case. What was even more disturbing was when they sifted through the debris, investigators recovered gasoline containers and propane cylinders that looked disturbingly similar to the ones Michael had photographed and posted online 8 months earlier. So, why had this happened? The first and most likely explanation centered on what had been happening inside his marriage. By the summer of 2014, Michael and his wife were going through a bitter divorce. The relationship had deteriorated to the point that she filed a restraining order against him. In fact, the only reason officers were already at the house that evening when the explosion happened was because of another domestic dispute. There were also signs that Michael had struggled with anger management before. Earlier that year, he had been charged following a road rage.
Okay, y'all, so I'm gonna go fix some nachos, eat them, and then I'll be back. Alright, my
Earlier that year, he had been charged following a road
nachos
rage
are in the
incident
oven.
after an argument with another driver escalated into criminal misconduct. Looking at those facts alone, the conclusion seems straightforward. This was a man in the middle of a volatile divorce who had snapped during yet another argument. But if the explosion really had been nothing more than a sudden burst of rage, why had Michael made a Facebook post about 25 gallons of gas and 40 pounds of propane 8 months before that argument ever happened? The timing didn't line up with someone acting on impulse. It suggested that whatever happened inside that garage had been thought about and possibly planned long before the night of August 5th. But not everyone who knew Michael saw it that way. In a Land Cruiser forum discussing his death, a man named Carl wrote, "I was close to Mike and his family. Mike did have a problem, but he did not try to harm his wife or child. This I know for a fact." But the belief of someone who knew him personally wasn't enough to explain away what the evidence actually pointed to.
Oh, I got cheese
The
on.
Facebook post was from 8 months earlier, and cylinders recovered from the debris matched exactly what he had photographed. And whether Angela had called 911 or not, Michael wouldn't have known. The garage was a detached structure with no line of sight to the front of the house, meaning as far as he was concerned, his wife and daughter were still inside when it went off. Everything about that night suggested that Michael hadn't just been trying to destroy the garage, he was trying to take out everything. That being said, none of these theories were ever confirmed, and no official motive was ever established. In hindsight, Michael's explanation about the grilling and hurricane supplies becomes much harder to take at face value. If the explosion had been planned, those supplies may have been the first step toward the fire that ultimately shook an entire neighborhood. Whatever Michael's true intention was, we will never know for sure.
Yeah, that sucks, man.
Get 2 sausage and egg biscuits for $5. Order in the app or head to Onions today. It's go time.
Now we gotta go help people customize and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Maybe where's the golf cart?
It's kind of crazy how much of our lives we can manage through the internet now. You can order dinner, book a hotel, buy a plane ticket, and have pretty much anything delivered to your front door in minutes. But for some reason, when it comes to something as important as finding a doctor, the process can still feel like it's stuck 20 years in the past. You still end up searching through websites, making phone calls, sitting on hold, and trying to figure out whether someone actually takes your insurance. I don't want you putting off taking care of your health because of that. I know I'm guilty of putting off something as simple as...
This was an ad. My bad,
They have over 150,000
Thank you for the
24 to 72 hours, and sometimes even the same day. Taking care of your... On the night of November 22nd, 2022, 22-year-old college student Jasmine Pace left her mother's home in Chattanooga, Tennessee shortly before 11:30 p.m. The following day was Thanksgiving, and Jasmine was expected to spend it with her family. Instead, her mother, Katrina Pace, received a text message from Jasmine's phone explaining that she had decided to stay with a friend for the rest of the week. Considering Jasmine had recently lost her grandmother to cancer, her family didn't immediately find the decision alarming. They thought she might simply want some time away to grieve. Right? 3 days later, that assumption would fail. On November 26, 2022, a new post appeared on Jasmine's Facebook account. The caption read, "Enjoying Thanksgiving with my baby." The post itself was a collection of random pictures and videos Jasmine had taken. On the surface, it was nothing unusual. But to people who knew Jasmine, the post didn't seem right. One comment simply said, "She didn't post this, y'all." Other comments pointed out that posting pictures like these were highly uncharacteristic of Jasmine. "I know Jasmine, and she would never post a picture of herself like this. It's too revealing, and she doesn't talk like that or tag her friends in a picture." Now, none of that proved anything on its own. It's not unusual for a 22-year-old to post something outside their normal habits or share photos they wouldn't usually upload. But one comment pointed out a much more disturbing detail. The recent tattoos Jasmine had gotten on her upper arm were completely missing, which meant these photographs weren't taken that Thanksgiving. What was even more concerning was that several other people noticed the word Chad still visible along the bottom of one of the photos, suggesting it may have been screenshotted from a private conversation on Snapchat. Taken together, those details pointed to one unsettling possibility. Someone had gone through Jasmine's older photos and private messages to piece together a Thanksgiving post after she disappeared. Worried that something had happened to her, her family began retracing her final movements. The friend she had supposedly been staying with hadn't seen or heard from her. Other friends had received text messages saying she wanted to be left alone, but strangely, none of those friends had actually spoken to her directly. Whoever had Jasmine's phone was trying to make everyone believe she was safe and simply wanted to be left alone, but it wasn't enough to convince her parents. Using a tracking feature on Jasmine's SUV, they located it parked outside an apartment complex. They reported the discovery to police, who took a missing persons report. But with no clear evidence of foul play at the time, the investigation made little immediate progress. So, Jasmine's parents continued searching on their own, and as far as they knew, Jasmine didn't know anyone who lived there, which raised another question. If Jasmine hadn't gone there to visit someone, then who had left her car there? The answer came from two details her family had overlooked: a location pin Jasmine had sent shortly before she disappeared, and phone records showing she had spent
Alright,
more
y'all,
than
my
an hour.
nachos are beeping. So, yeah. Okay, y'all, we got the nachos! Ooh! Alright, let's hop.
Or speaking with a phone number her family didn't recognize the day before she vanished. Both details eventually led them to apartment number 210. It belonged to Jason Chen, a computer science student Jasmine had recently been seeing. When Jasmine's mother entered the apartment, she didn't have to search for long before realizing something was terribly wrong. Jasmine's travel bag was sitting on the kitchen counter, and her driver's license and credit cards had been left behind in a drawer. Now, leaving behind a driver's license and credit cards alone in an empty apartment didn't necessarily mean Jasmine hadn't left voluntarily. By this point, almost every detail seemed to contradict the last. Jasmine was supposedly staying with a friend who hadn't seen her. Her SUV had been left outside an apartment she had no connection to. And the only signs she was safe were messages no one could confirm she had actually sent. Police, meanwhile, had secured the apartment and later returned with a search warrant. Unfortunately, every room they searched only made the situation worse. There was blood on the hardwood floors, between the bathroom tiles, and soaked into the bedroom carpet. Investigators also found large quantities of cleaning supplies in empty trash bags, suggesting someone had spent considerable time trying to clean the apartment. But the strongest evidence came only moments later. Investigators recovered a knife from Jason's bedroom and bloodied clothing discarded near a dumpster outside his apartment. It was clear some sort of altercation had taken place involving a knife. And when investigators sprayed the apartment with Blue Star, a chemical that reveals traces of cleaned up blood, the entire hallway lit up. Sadly, with that amount of blood, it was becoming more and more likely that Jasmine hadn't survived. Over the next several days, more and more evidence kept coming out, revealing what had happened after Jasmine arrived at Jason's apartment. Surveillance footage showed Jasmine's car around midnight on the 22nd. Later, it was driven away by someone noticeably taller than her, heading toward the same apartment complex where her parents had found it parked.
Hold up, y'all. I'm gonna go get my grape Dr. Nuff. Alright, y'all. So, I got this cherry Dr. Nuff yesterday. I haven't tried it yet. It's not cherry, it's grape. It's new. And, yeah. I'm gonna try it for the first time. Ooh. That's the only Dr. Nuff I've tried that doesn't taste like medicine. Holy crap. Alright, let's get back into it.
Jason's movements the following day revealed even more. Surveillance footage from a Walmart showed him alone, buying bandages, peroxide, and cleaning products. For a college student whose friend had just disappeared after spending the night at his apartment, those purchases painted a chilling picture. However, the most damaging footage came later that day. It showed Jason leaving his apartment carrying a large suitcase before loading it into his car. By November 29th, police had tracked Jason to his parents' home and arrested him. They also noticed fresh cuts on his right hand, suggesting he had recently been in some kind of physical struggle. Looking through his belongings, they found Jasmine's SIM card tucked inside a glasses case in his backpack.
Oh my god.
That single discovery answered one of the biggest questions surrounding the case. Jason had been the one sending messages from Jasmine's phone after she disappeared. And it also explained the unusual Thanksgiving Facebook post that Jasmine's family and friends had immediately recognized wasn't hers. He had gone through Jasmine's older photographs and private conversations before uploading them himself, hoping to convince everyone she was still alive. However, in trying to alter Jasmine's digital trail, Jason forgot to cover his own. His phone records showed he had driven out to a stretch of road running alongside the Tennessee River. On December 1st, investigators searched that same area and found a suitcase. Inside were Jasmine's remains. At trial, Jason's defense team tried to argue self-defense. But after 7 days of testimony, the jury needed less than an hour to reach a verdict. Jason was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for premeditated murder. In hindsight, the strange Thanksgiving post that was meant to hide the truth ultimately became one of the strongest pieces of evidence against him.
That's terrible. So, he killed her and put her in a suitcase. That's awful. Man, I knew that one was going to end bad.
This game, you're not.
On May 8, 2013, a user by the name Emily C. made a post on Yelp about her missing friend, stating, "My friend Maribel Ramos has been missing since Thursday, May 2nd. She was last seen at her apartment in Orange, California. Please help her family, friends, and I to find her. If you have any information as to her whereabouts, please call Detective Ramirez or Orange Police Watch Commander. Please share the link with your friends and family. We need all the help we can get." The post quickly gained traction online as dozens of users started responding with concern and support. Some of them knew her personally. "I met Maribel many times at the dog park. She is so sweet and I admire her accomplishments. I was horrified to see her missing person post. Shocked me." Others had found out about her through news channels. "Wow, I just saw the article on ABC7, praying for everything to turn out okay." But what no one knew at the time was that among the dozens of people commenting on the thread was someone directly responsible for Maribel's disappearance. Maribel Ramos was a 36-year-old woman. She was a U.S. Army veteran and had served for 8 years, including 2 combat tours in Iraq. She was about to graduate from Cal State Fullerton with a degree in criminal justice in the spring of 2013. But exactly 24 days before her commencement ceremony, she suddenly disappeared without a trace. 11 days before she went missing, Maribel made a phone call to 911. In hindsight, what she said on that call was her first cry for help. Then, on the evening of May 2nd, 2013, a security camera captured Maribel dropping off her rent check at her apartment's leasing office. It was the last time anyone saw her, and she was reported missing the next day on May 3rd, 2013. That's when one of her friends had made the Yelp post, and before long, people in the area began offering their own theories about what might have happened. One user, MB, who lived just a few blocks from Maribel's apartment, left a comment raising concerns about the safety of the neighborhood, saying, "I read true crime voraciously, watch forensic files, and have attended a citizens police academy. I live about 4 or 5 blocks from her apartment. That area is kinda ghetto. It could have been gang-related or a random crime incident where someone kidnapped her. She is a lovely girl. I pray she's found quickly and in good health." On the surface, this wasn't a stretch. Maribel was 5 foot 3 inches tall and weighed about 125 pounds. But there was a problem with that theory. When police searched Maribel's apartment, they found no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle, and nothing to indicate that anything violent had taken place inside, which made it unlikely that a stranger had broken in and taken her. Instead, the circumstances increasingly pointed towards someone Maribel already knew. Police began looking into the people closest to Maribel, and her phone records quickly led them to her boyfriend, Paul Lopez. The two had met on Plenty of Fish, a dating site, and had only been dating for about a month. Maribel called Paul on the evening of May 2nd, shortly before she was last seen on surveillance footage, so investigators brought him in for questioning. But Paul's story checked out. GPS data from his car showed he was nowhere near Maribel's apartment that night, and police cleared him then and there. With every lead outside the apartment going nowhere, attention shifted back to where the case had gained traction, the Yelp thread. While police had been working through suspects, the comment section beneath Emily's post had continued to grow, and people had already started noticing something. One commenter going by the name KCK had been drawing attention from several users. He appeared unusually insistent on proving how close he and Maribel were, even though nobody had questioned him about it. He wrote, "She is my BFF and my only family. She is absolutely the best woman I ever met. We had so much fun together. I miss her so much. She always knew that I will give my life for her without any hesitation." On its own, the comment could have been written off as a friend in distress. But one user, Grant D, noticed something disturbing about the way Casey had worded it. "Am I the only one finding it odd that this KC posted here and used past tense to refer to Maribel? We had, she always knew, as opposed to we have or she knows." However, Casey quickly clarified why he had used that tense. "Grant, thanks for correcting my grammar. That is my second language, and I still need help with that time to time." But MB, the same local user who had earlier suggested Maribel might have been the victim of a random crime, pointed out something else. Casey's profile picture. It showed Casey and Maribel together, with Maribel leaning closely against him. For someone who had publicly described themselves as just friends, MB found the photo unsettling. MB wrote, "Sorry, Mr. Casey, but the picture you use as your Yelp profile picture is kind of disturbing. I thought I heard you say on television that you loved Maribel, but you were just friends. I also read that her boyfriend was waiting for her along with her family at the softball game, so I find that picture a little disconcerting." Individually, none of these details proved anything. But viewed together, they painted a different picture of how Casey seemed to view his relationship with Maribel. Casey, meanwhile, defended the photo, saying he saw nothing wrong with using a picture of himself with someone he loved. Emily, who had created the original post, had also seen Casey at a candlelight vigil for Maribel, and she had noticed something strange about his behavior. "Casey, I saw you at the vigil. Why did you sit so far away at a distance? Why are you uncomfortable?" What Casey said in response made the situation even more unsettling. "One of Maribel's family members asked me why I was there. Also, a verbal threat when I was there. I was uncomfortable that police are assuming or insinuating that I'm a suspect." He then added, "I understand that we are all concerned about her, especially I am more than anyone else. Yes, she is my only family and I will give my life for her. Is that love? People can assume all they want and express their opinion." By this point, Casey was openly talking about police considering him a suspect, even though nobody on the thread had accused him of anything. And despite all the attention his comments were getting, Casey kept posting. Eventually, one user suggested him to stop commenting because the more he tried to explain himself, the more suspicious he was starting to look. Shortly after, Casey disappeared from the thread. Casey was Maribel Ramos's roommate. His real name was Kwang Choi Joy, a 54-year-old who had been living with Maribel for around 18 months. Casey had met Maribel through a Craigslist ad she posted looking for a roommate, and the two began living together in 2011. Over time, Casey developed feelings for Maribel that she didn't return. He had seemingly become obsessed with her, going as far as getting cosmetic surgery to look younger and paying to take her on a cruise. But during this time, Casey lost his job and stopped paying his share of the rent. The two began arguing over money, and eventually Maribel told him he needed to move out. And this is when the 911 call was made. 11 days before Maribel disappeared, one of their arguments got bad enough that she called the police.
If you love junk journaling, Five Below literally has everything you need to make your memories super cute.
Sorry about the ads, y'all.
Why are you crying? Because I'm afraid. What? Your roommate? Well, he is like a 3-time belt. He's Korean, so he's an older gentleman. But we had a discussion tonight, and I honestly felt like I'm just telling him that I'm not comfortable with him anymore, and apparently he's supposed to be leaving at the end of the month.
By the time Maribel went missing, police already had reason to look closely at KC, so they placed him under surveillance. KC began visiting the Orange County Public Library to use its computers. An IT specialist monitoring his activity found that KC had searched, "How long does it take a human body to decay?" Then he pulled up a satellite map of a remote area and zoomed in on a lone tree beside a road, almost as if he was looking for a specific spot. When the police went to search that area, they found a shallow grave hidden in the brush near the tree.
Oh,
The
God.
body in it was so badly decomposed that investigators had to rely on dental records just to confirm it was Maribel. The Orange County coroner spent 6 months trying to determine a cause of death, but the condition of the remains made it impossible. Despite that, the coroner ruled her death a homicide. Casey was arrested on May 17, 2013. In July 2014, he was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. In the end, Grant D. had been right. When Casey posted on that Yelp thread, he hadn't been careless with his grammar. He had referred to Maribel in the past tense because he already knew he had killed her. And while dozens of users were posting their concern and hoping for a safe return, Casey was reading every single one of them, knowing exactly where Maribel was the entire time.
That's messed up.
Taylor Jean Scrum was a 22-year-old physical therapist assistant from Jacksonville, Florida. According to her family, Taylor had a passion for trying new things and was always eager to meet new people. One of those passions was motorcycles. Under the TikTok username NinjaTay21, Taylor documented her life on two wheels. Whether it was joking about high-speed rides or playful exchanges with other riders, motorcycles had become a central part of her identity. Her videos attracted thousands of fellow motorcycle enthusiasts. But not everyone was there to cheer her on. Some followers couldn't help but worry about how dangerous the hobby could be, with one commenter writing, My mom was a paramedic, and the horror stories I have heard about not wearing the right gear on a bike is real. Please be safe. But Taylor never seemed intimidated by those comments. She understood the risks and accepted them as a part of the experience, which is why she would occasionally joke about the dangers of riding. On May 23, 2022, she posted yet another video aimed at the people who kept warning her. The on-screen caption read, "You're going to get yourself killed on that."
I'll be right back, y'all. I got to go to the bathroom.
Of expressing her frustration with those who constantly commented on the danger she was putting herself in. The TikTok caption even read, "I know, Karen, I know." Now, it's hard to blame the people who are worried. Motorcycling on its own is dangerous enough, but Ninja Tay wasn't just a casual rider. She was a sports bike enthusiast, regularly riding bikes built for very high speeds. And in 2022 alone, over 6,200...
I got a prediction. She jokes about going high speeds, dying, and not wearing gear, I guess. I bet she's gonna fucking die.
Motorcyclists were killed on American roads, the highest number ever recorded. Later that evening, Taylor set out for what had become a weekly tradition. She joined a group of fellow riders at Woody's Barbecue in Palm Coast for the area's weekly bike night. It was a regular meetup where local motorcyclists would gather, eat, and ride together. After bike night wrapped up, Taylor and 3 other riders got on their motorcycles and began heading back to Jacksonville, traveling northbound on Interstate 95. At approximately 9:39 p.m., as the group approached mile marker 296 in Flagler County, all 4 motorcycles collided with one another while traveling in the left lane. According to Florida Highway Patrol, investigators were never able to determine why the riders crashed into one another. The impact threw all 4 riders onto the interstate. An SUV traveling in the center lane then struck some of the riders, while the survivors were taken to a nearby hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. By the end of the night, authorities confirmed that 2 of the 4 riders had died in the crash. One of them was 22-year-old Taylor Jean Scrum. But while the crash itself was devastating, one thing about it didn't make sense. How had 4 experienced motorcyclists, all familiar with the road, suddenly collided with each other on an open stretch of interstate with no obstruction and no other vehicle involved? The most obvious explanation was speeding. Several witnesses reported seeing the group riding aggressively and weaving through traffic shortly before the crash. And given Taylor's online presence, where high-speed rides and adrenaline-fueled clips were a regular feature, it wasn't surprising that many people felt the answer was obvious. Across social media, particularly on Taylor's last TikTok post, the prevailing opinion was that the riders had been pushing their luck until it finally ran out, with one commenter writing, "It gives me chills every time I hear about a biker death, then I go to their page and this is the last vid." But even though those witness accounts existed, the Florida Highway Patrol never concluded that the group had been racing, nor did investigators publicly identify excessive speed as the cause of the collision. So the official explanation remained that the motorcycles had collided with one another for an unexplained reason. Still, not everyone was convinced. Some people online believe the SUV driver may have deliberately swerved toward the motorcycles, with one user writing, "If the bikes were traveling at an excessive amount of speed, how fast was the SUV going that was seen approaching the group in the center lane when they collided? Did the SUV do a road rage swerve because the bikes were speeding, causing one of the riders to panic swerve into the other riders to avoid being hit by the SUV? I ride, and I've seen people in cars do crazy things to stop riders from doing things they feel inappropriate. It's a thought." It was a reasonable question. Investigators determined that the SUV only came into contact with the riders after they had already been thrown into the roadway. There was nothing to suggest the vehicle had caused the initial collision. Other possibilities that could have explained the crash, such as a blown tire or a mechanical fault that sent one rider into another, were also ruled out. No defects were found in any of the 4 motorcycles, and no roadway hazards were identified at the scene. With every testable explanation eliminated, the Florida Highway Patrol was never able to determine exactly why the 4 motorcycles collided. In the days that followed, Taylor's social media was flooded with people returning to watch the final video she had posted just hours before the crash. What had once been a lighthearted joke aimed at the people warning her was now being watched as something else entirely. A memorial for Taylor Jean Scrum was held on June 17, 2022 at McDonald Funeral Home in Rock Falls, Illinois. Her final TikTok post remains on her page to this day.
Alright, y'all. Well, thanks for watching this video, guys, and leave a like, subscribe, comment, all that. Subscribe. I'm saying that over and over because apparently if you haven't subscribed yet, the subscribe button lights up when I say subscribe. So just trying to test that out. All right. Peace.